Hi, Carlin here. I'm recently back from a week-long solo trip to Guatemala, which had me reflecting on the joys of solo travel, and also some of the ups and downs that come with it. According to research, women are increasingly interested in going on solo adventures, both domestic and international. One report states that 40% of all female travelers have voiced desire to travel alone in 2025, which is up 8 percentage points from last year. There are over 60,000 women in the Solo Female Travel Reddit group, and there are an increasing amount of tours, travel apps, accommodations that are targeted towards women only. Elaine and I are both avid solo travelers, but we've never actually really sat down to talk about what it is we love about it, what about solo travel can be hard, our favorite, least favorite destinations, and more. Again, I'm Carlin.
And I'm Elaine.
Welcome back to our podcast, Related. Hi, Elaine.
Hi, Carlin.
Good morning. This is earlier than we usually record.
I know, which is why I am groggy because, I am a midnight person, if there's such a thing.
And I'm a morning owl, but Elaine and I were just discussing before we hit the record button that neither of us slept particularly well last night. So apologies in advance to all of our faithful listeners. Elaine, so I just want to start off with the broader question of why do we think more women are looking to travel solo?
Yeah. Good question. I mean, on a personal level, so it's hard for me to answer that without
No, please.
Solo travel, which is, I like to solo travel because there are places I want to go, and I don't want to wait for people to want to go with me.
Yeah.
I just want to see those places.
Yeah.
And I think there are more people who are realizing that they don't have to wait for someone to go see things that they want to do. But I also think that there's another subsection of people who perhaps want to leave things behind for a bit and take a vacation from not just the place, but also sometimes from the people. As much as they love them, there is something freeing in taking time for yourself. And sometimes the best way to do that is to remove yourself from home.
Yep.
So I think those two combined would be why I would think that there's an increase in solo traveling. What do you think?
Yes, I agree with you. You're right. It's really hard to be able to answer this question without adding in the personal layer. I probably solo travel for two different reasons. I think one is a little bit more of the escapist vacation from the norm, if that makes sense. So if I'm feeling, I don't know, if I think about the times that, especially when I first started solo traveling, it often had to be, it was during times when I was feeling heartbroken, when work was really hard, when I was maybe a little bored or restless, and I just needed to kind of carve out a little bit of space and time for myself and frankly just get a change of scenery. And it was similar to you, I think, both easier but also preferred to do that in a way where it was just me, not with other people. I think the other part for me, which is maybe a little bit different than something that you've said, but not in disagreement, is I'm one of those people, I don't know how you feel about this, I hate going to movies sometimes with other people, especially people who are sitting next to me and constantly like asking me a question or giving me commentary, or sometimes I'm like, oh, is this person enjoying this movie as much as I am? Or are they hating this movie as much as I am?
You just want to enjoy it.
I just want to enjoy it for myself. I want to sit in my own little bubble and have my own experience of the film without somebody somebody else's commentary or without worrying about how someone else is feeling about the movie.
Yeah.
I know that not everyone else has that feeling, but I just, for better or for worse, I pick up on other people's experiences and emotions in a deeply profound way, and movies is one way, and that happens to me on travel as well too. I think that when in my experience, when I'm traveling with other people, I'm constantly in some ways sometimes even sacrificing my own personal experience for the sake of others. That's not, that's a generalization. It's not fully across the board. So I have found that solo travel has also been the time and the place where I can really just do exactly what I need for me without having to worry about whether someone else is having a good time or sacrificing my own good time for someone else's preferences.
Yeah, I do think that traveling with a buddy or in a group often means compromise. So I can see where sometimes you just want to do what you want to do. It is interesting because you know that there are several types of solo travel that I do.
Yes.
When I want to like get away from the world, I tend to go camping.
Yeah.
Or hiking or something where it's like I am really getting away from the world.
And to be clear for the listeners, she will, put all of her stuff in her car and go to remote places by herself. The only way of communicating with her will be by like satellite phone.
Yes, which I often won't take either. So when I want to escape, that's like the kind of travel that I will do. And then there's the other kind of solo traveling, which I think is more about the first thing I was saying, which is more about seeing things and seeing people and seeing cultures, so I would actually divide them up into the types of travel I do as well.
Yeah.
I think the reasons I travel tend to influence how I'm going to travel.
Yep.
But you kind of do the same thing.
Yeah.
I feel like your reasons and your motivations are kind of more intermixed than mine.
Yeah, they are. But I will also say that I do choose location a little bit based on that similar path of reasoning. Like, for example, a rural area versus a city. I think sometimes when I really want to be kind of around people in the midst of things, going to see museums and culture and people watch and enjoy restaurants, a city or a more central environment is definitely the better place for me. Like I think about, I've done solo travel to, this is so cliche, but in a somewhat recent trip, went to Bali, and I went to the town of Ubud, which is pretty well known for having a pretty significant, like, not even just obviously both a tourist infrastructure, but just there's walkability. You can walk to restaurants. There's tons of shops and things to do. While as on the contrary, as you also know, because you joined me for part of it, I've also done solo travel to like in the middle of nowhere, Ireland, right? Where you have to drive to any town or grocery store or restaurant. But there is something, maybe that's my version of camping. I'm just not as rugged and as, cool as you are. But sometimes I just want to be really, really, really alone. And honestly, sometimes those trips are, for me, actually the hardest because I get really introspective and reflective in, I think, a really purposeful and good way. But part of it is because I've kind of cut myself off from the rest of the world, and I'm much more like in tune with nature and myself that way.
Yeah. So there is a spectrum for you.
Yes.
I think my spectrum is probably a little wider, actually on both sides, because on the one side I like camping. On the other side, I think I'm the only one who's done like a tour as like a solo traveler.
Yes. But your
like,
tour,
I don't think
your tour was to Antarctica, which
yes,
you cannot reach. I'm actually curious because I've never done a tour. What was that like?
So just following up like what we were saying, the reason I went on a tour was because it was really the only way to get to a place to see that I wanted to see.
Yeah.
But I went alone. I didn't have a partner come with me, which meant I actually got assigned a room with a roommate, which was like a very interesting experience.
Oh my God, that would make me anxious.
Well, so it made me anxious, but actually not so much because I had stayed in like hostels and stuff before. So it was similar to that. And the boats to Antarctica are fairly small for cruise boats. For obvious reasons. And so you can't really have the luxury of your own room.
Do you get preferences around snoring or bedtime or like introvert versus extrovert? Like my nightmare is being stuck in a little boat cabin, and you're already stuck on a boat, right?
Yeah.
So you're stuck in a little boat cabin with a chatty Kathy who like keeps the lights on and is blaring music and snores.
But like yes, there are the sleepy habits which could have been horrendous but weren't.
Yeah.
But you're really not in the cabin that much. You're kind of there's like educational presentations on the ship, and it's really just 3 days down to Antarctica and then 3 days back.
Yeah.
So it wasn't that much of time to like actually develop those really long-term annoyances. The same with a hostel. It's like you kind of go in, you see the people, they could annoy you for a night, but then you kind of move on.
Yeah, fair enough. Did you befriend your roommate? Did you become friends? You did?
We didn't stay in touch, but we were friendly. We went to meals together.
Yeah. I mean, I will say that is a pro that I have found as a solo female traveler. I often meet women, the friendships, I put those in quotations, are often fleeting, right? They're just momentary to that point in time and context. Yes. But it's not hard to find companionship as a solo traveler if you want it.
And I think especially with female solo travelers, because I think part of the ethos going in is that you are alone and there's no one to watch your back. So you're going to watch other female solo travelers' backs and they're going to watch yours.
Yeah.
So yes, it can be very fleeting, but for some reason it's also like a fairly strong fleeting bond.
Yep. This is going back sort of a little bit to the original question. Something just popped into my mind. I'm wondering how much of this trend is, and you and I have separately talked a little bit about mental and emotional load, which maybe we should go into in a little bit, or the mental and emotional load that women are carrying, I think, especially at home, at work, all the time.
All the time,
But I also am wondering if women are inherently just becoming, and referencing, the episode that we did on the 4B movement, more independent. I know financially so, right? And travel does require money. I think you and I have also witnessed and experienced the spectrum of what travel can look like on different budgets, having started to solo travel as like backpackers, for example.
Mentioning the hostels, yes.
Mentioning the hostels, which I have also experienced, but also, doing it with, our good old white collar jobs. So go ahead. Yeah.
Though when I first started solo traveling, which was the year out of college, the people I met, I think it was more of like a cultural thing, because I met a lot of Australians. I met a lot of Germans.
Canadians too.
Yeah.
Right?
A lot of Canadians who were also solo travelers.
Yeah.
Both genders.
Yeah.
And I think that was a cultural thing, because a lot of them were around my age, kind of either going into college or leaving college. And this was just something that was on the
totally. I do
for
feel
them
like the gap year for a lot of at least Western countries, not, and I don't know why the US is not really part of that, but a lot of the it's kind of it's normal to go on a gap year. Yeah.
Especially within Europe.
Yes. Yep. Yep. Yeah. I had that experience when I did my gap year or post-year travel year, post-college travel year. Oh my gosh, folks, still not fully awake here. In Australia, and a lot of the travelers were either Europeans or Canadians. Yeah. Very few. I actually got mistaken for Canadian quite a bit because there were so few Americans.
Yeah. And I do think that that's because it's not an expectation, but there's like a cultural understanding that if that's something that you want to do, you can do it.
Yeah.
Whereas when I was going on my trip, again, the year out of college, there were a lot of questions about how am I going to explain this to future employers when I get back?
Yeah. Do you have a lot of other female friends who solo travel?
No.
Me either. I mean, I know a couple, but I
know a couple.
But I think that's the thing that was a little surprising about reading some of these studies was it's interesting. When I do solo travel, I do feel like I'm seeing other solo female travelers for sure. And I do feel like I'm noticing more of them. And yet among my friend group, I often get the reaction from people of like, oh, you're a free spirit. You're so independent. Like I could never. And which is really interesting because I don't feel, I don't know. I don't know. That question just came up for me of why is it that I like to solo travel and some of my friends don't or aren't maybe.
Yeah. I don't know. I honestly don't know. Is it like a curiosity about the world? Is it the safety net that you feel? Is it?
I think it's maybe a safety thing. I think some people feel more comfortable traveling with other people. I think also there is, and I think this is a fair point, is some people really worried about feeling lonely.
Yeah. And I do think that there is an aspect of travel that you have to get comfortable with, especially when you internationally travel, is a feeling of not belonging. And we've talked about this before. Is because of our upbringing and our being biracial, there may be a stronger comfort with being on the outside looking in. Yeah. Which is very much the experience of traveling sometimes.
Yeah. Or navigating the gray a little bit. Or
navigating the gray. Yeah. And also like being willing to go out of your comfort zone, not like significantly, but like to not make others feel uncomfortable with your presence, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I have another question for you. I have a lot of questions for you, I'm realizing. Like, what would be a trip that you think back on that you felt really changed you?
So that's a really hard question to answer because I think every trip changes you. Yeah. So which trip changed me like the most?
Yeah. And maybe it could even be a couple and they changed you in different ways.
Yeah. So I think the trip after college where was like 8 months of solo travel around Europe and Central America, and then I spent a month in Hawaii. I think really that time in my life when I was kind of figuring out the transition from childhood to adulthood was very significant. I think the trip to Antarctica was really significant because the vastness of Antarctica, I think, changed me in a way that I had not anticipated, actually.
Wait, tell me more about that.
So there are no people in Antarctica.
Lots of penguins, though.
lots of penguins. But it's just, people often refer to Antarctica, and I think to some extent the North Pole too, when they're talking about like climate change and the vastness of the world. And I think there are very few places on Earth that you can go and be awed by the smallness of who we are. I think I've had that experience in other places. Like I remember going to the Grand Canyon and being like, oh my God, like who I am in the time spectrum of the Grand Canyon is like a tiny little speck. I also felt it the year I drove cross country during the pandemic and was camping in Wyoming and looking up and seeing the full spectrum of the Milky Way for the first time and feeling small. But Antarctica was that feeling on a whole different level because there weren't other people. There was because it was a tour, but it was just the vastness of it. The coldness of it, the iciness of it was just, I think that changed me in that way.
Yeah.
So I think probably those were the two most impactful trips. And New Year's.
I think that from like true, I think there are other, as you were talking, I was thinking about travel trips that have changed me, and there have certainly been a couple that were not solo that changed me, maybe just because of distance away from home or sort of the firsts. But I will say the first that I will mention is when I was living in New York, I lived this was in my late 20s, just after business school. I was working first in the music industry and then in the beauty industry, which are just like two very work hard, play hard industries. I was dating a lot, not particularly, I don't know, some might call it successfully, but I wasn't really finding deep emotional intimacy, and was dating a lot of, I think, honestly, fuckboys. And I don't know, maybe also people thought I was a little bit avoidant too, if you were on the other side of the coin and dating me. And I remember taking my first trip to Sedona, actually, for a long weekend just to kind of get away from the concrete jungle and just some of the stress of it all, and feeling really at peace and also just kind of empowered, frankly, of, oh, I can do this. Oh, like I am capable of carving out space for myself. And then I think about Ireland, actually, which was that was about a year and a half ago. It'll be 2 years this summer. And as you know, because you joined me for the last week of it, it was sort of the time where I had decided I was going to leave my corporate job and take some time off. It was also, I was going through, it was nearing the end of a very important relationship to me, and was sort of struggling with that, which also the distance apart during that time, I think, almost sort of brought some of that stuff to light for me. And then it was also when our mama died too. So there was just a whole lot of like grief. And I don't know that I would have, I think solo travel for me can sometimes be a time and a space to really get deeply introspective, sometimes sit with the really hard stuff, which can honestly be the hardest part of solo travel, I think, is you like sit with all your feelings. And sometimes those are really good feelings and celebratory. And sometimes they're really tough feelings. And I think actually maybe in some ways solo travel has made me much better at just kind of sitting with my emotions and listening to myself. But yeah, so I think about that trip of Ireland, of it was a lot of sitting with maybe tough emotions and ultimately sort of making some big decisions for myself.
Yeah. Listening to what you just said, I wonder if in some ways the answer to that question and the answer to your first question are maybe the same. Is the why do you travel? and what has changed you the most, it's like maybe you travel for that transformative change. Like, I don't think I've ever come back from a solo trip and been the same person.
Yeah. 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 And like, I also think I think that's exactly it. And I'm just also thinking about when you're one person, kind of like, I was about to say against the world, but I actually think you become more with the world when you're on your own, right? Like, my experience has been, like, thinking again to Indonesia, when you're one person, especially one solo woman, I find that people are kinder, they are more nurturing.
People look out for you.
People really look out for you, and I find that I am able to learn and embed about a culture in maybe a way that I wouldn't if I was with other people or a group. You kind of have that tourist shield around you, if that makes sense.
But also, you are looking for things to do. You are looking for companionship. You are looking to make those connections. You are looking for the person who will invite you to dinner at their restaurant. You are looking for the person who will invite you along on an activity.
Yeah, totally.
You're looking for that roommate who will share a meal with you.
But I think that's true. But I also think it's if you're one person, you're more approachable too.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I think the burden is less on them as well. They're not breaking into a
existing
preset
unit
circle. They are reaching out to another solo person.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's also just making me, I think what you said about this sort of transformation is so spot on. And I think the other piece of the why I solo travel is I don't want to always be a tourist. I want to be like a traveler, if that makes sense. There's a distinction for me.
So it's funny because my mode when I get into a new city by myself is the first thing I do is I look up and see if there's a free public tour of the city. Yeah. Which is like the most touristy thing you can do.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's what I do day one because then I get the layout of the city.
You're like, I got it. Yeah.
And once you get the layout of the city, you can like explore to your heart's content.
Yep.
And then the city is yours.
It's so true. It's so true. You had asked me this question separately, and I'm just asking it too. But do you think, you and I are both single ladies right now. Mm-hmm. Do you think when or if you're partnered, you will still solo travel?
Yes. I don't think I'll ever stop solo traveling.
Same.
Because I think I'm constantly looking for that transformation. I think it's the evolution of person that has just become so deeply ingrained in who I am. That being said, I think that if I were partnered, there would definitely be opportunities that I would want them to come along on. I don't think every travel has to be solo travel.
Yeah. I agree. I've definitely traveled with boyfriends in the past. I would definitely want to travel with future partners, but it's like to this sort of transformative experience. And I think it's important to like learn and know how to be alone with yourself. I also find that sometimes I come back from those trips with just so much perspective, especially the non-US ones, where I just feel like the rest of the world, again, a generalization, values some really important things that sometimes maybe Americans lose sight of in our like capitalist go. And I feel like I come back just feeling clear. I also maybe love myself a little bit more too. I just feel like a little bit more empowered and a little bit more liberated.
Speaking of that, I do just want to, I think a lot of, the counterpoint. I think a reason why a lot of people don't travel is because, or solo travel is because of the risks that they feel.
Yeah.
How do you square that away in your mind when you solo travel?
I tend to I tend to either go to places where I know that I can speak the language, which for me tends to be English or Spanish, maybe Portuguese a little bit, enough to get by, and or a place that has some existing tourist infrastructure. Either I know through searching through Reddit that other solo female travelers have sort of been there, done that. I am probably not the solo female traveler who's going to pioneer the trip to the place that no other either traveler or solo female traveler has been before. I don't feel comfortable with that. I need a little bit of social proof to sort of make sure that it's okay. I think about Sri Lanka actually it's a place that I've been kind of thinking I want to go. And it's not a place that I know a lot of people who have gone, but when I've been doing some research, and I actually, on my trip to Indonesia, one of the women I befriended and had dinner with had just come from Sri Lanka and was just speaking about how kind and friendly and safe she felt. And I was like, okay, this is a place that, so I think is a barometer, I think. And then, we've talked about this before. I just came back from this trip in Guatemala. I had a weird, strange little run-in with a bus share where the bus stopped halfway to my destination. The bus driver asked me to get into another very strange, but beat up car. And I want to be able to navigate those situations, or feel comfortable to navigate those situations. So I kind of put myself in the what would the worst case scenario be? How am I enabling myself to navigate tricky situations, if that makes sense? Yeah. And if it's an environment where I don't feel like I could do that, I won't go. Yeah. What about you?
I think that's right. I think knowing where your boundaries are, and knowing that being able to stay on the ground where you can say no.
Yeah.
Is really important. And I think that takes constant surveillance of your surroundings and your situation. So I do think you do have to be on heightened awareness, but I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing. Because if you're really immersed in seeing the place anyway, you're going to be clued into these things.
Yeah.
And just not going to a place where you can't say no anymore.
Yep. Agreed. Don't have it's what is your plan B, your plan C? What is your safety net? And I think that is really important. To wrap up, I'm curious, if you have any additional thoughts on the sort of why do women solo travel, but also for any solo female travelers or women out there who are thinking about solo female traveling and just haven't quite made the leap, what sort of suggestions or advice might you give to them?
So, like I said, I started solo traveling pretty early. I think a lot of my peers, and you said this, you touched on this about the shock and awe of seeing people do that. I think that there is a barrier to that first trip.
Yeah.
But once you take it, I think things change.
Yeah. I agree.
So I would say don't be afraid of that first trip. And it doesn't have to be something out of your comfort zone. It can be something, I think your first solo trip could be somewhere you've been before.
Yeah. I was going to say something similar in that a solo trip, I think a lot of what we've referenced here has been solo international trips, but I think a solo trip could be a 2-hour drive and an overnight away from home, right?
Yeah.
And I think that your suggestion of a place that you've been before and really loved and maybe want to return to enjoy for yourself. I also think having some people really I sometimes like this is having, kind of to your point around having, you always go on a public tour when you first go to a place. I sometimes will I'll maybe book a massage at every place that I go, just so I have a plan or something to orient at least maybe my first day around. Which I think can be helpful versus it being completely unstructured too.
Yeah, you land in a city and you need to get your bearing. And then if you have a plan to get your bearing, that's really helpful.
It's really helpful.
But I do think that if you do go to the same place as somewhere you've been before, you will realize how different the experience is between solo traveling and traveling with someone else.
Yeah.
Because you will see the exact same place in a very different way.
Yeah. So profound this morning, Elaine. We should wake you
it's
up
because
earlier.
It's because I haven't slept well. I get into my musings.
It is so good. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed our conversation this week, we look forward to sharing more with you.
Follow us now so that when our next episode premieres in 2 weeks, you can be sure not to miss it. You can find us wherever you listen to your podcasts.
See you next time, everyone.